Okay, so this is the Raven magazine of philosophy. It's a literary magazine of philosophy. So the things here are trying to be more literary based. Sausage making is a private affair, yeah, Descartes. And this is the issue on remorse, and this is called Faith in World. So here we go. And this is by Anil Gomes, Faith in World. Lockdown arrived in a fidget of activity. I spent the day before helping in my daughter's school, hoping to feel of use. The teachers were busy photocopying worksheets, trying to figure out what would be required of them in the coming days and weeks. I talked philosophy with the children, class after class, in the large and drafty hall. We talked about aliens who wore sofas on their heads and whether sitting on your sister turned her into a chair. The space fizzed with laughter and chatter. The next day, we all withdrew into our homes. Descartes' meditation on first philosophy begins with a withdrawal. The mediator closes the door to a study, clears his mind of all worries, and settles down to determine which of his opinions are stable and likely to last. There he stays for 6 days, reflecting on his beliefs, on God, on nature. There he comes to recognize his essence as a thinking thing. Descartes' philosophy begins in confinement. It begins in isolation. Many critics have worried about the privilege of this starting point, about the arrogance of assuming that philosophical progress can be achieved all on one's own. Quote, "The life which I am constrained to lead," end quote, Prince Elizabeth of Bohemia writes in a letter to Descartes, quote, "does not leave enough time at my disposal to acquire a habit of meditation in accordance with your rules," end quote. Philosophical reflection in a stove-heated room is all well and good, but at some point the children need feeding. Sandera says, when I buy the sausages at the farm here, while standing at the counter, I can turn around and see the calves in the barn. See, that's cool. Like, you're actually near the food you're making. It's interesting. A lot of people, I mean, I'm in New York, you never see the food really here. Yeah. So, and people, like, they freak out, you know, because they've never seen food and, like, how it gets there. And so the fact that they have no, you know, familiarity with it freaks them out. I do make a point, like, we have a lobster dinner sometimes in my family. We buy the lobsters live, and I make a point of killing the damn lobsters, like, fast. But, like, I kill them fast so they don't have to boil slowly. So yeah. That way I actually get to feel like I'm making my food, like actually making my food. I mean, I don't catch lobsters, but after that. Cinesemiotics, okay, I will cancel that word unless it's in the paper, okay? Tindera says, first I pet the crow, and a month later it's on my plate. Yeah, pet the cow, sorry, not the crow. Although I guess you could also eat crow, but that's a different thing. This criticism of Descartes has it that the content of his philosophy is tainted by the isolationist methodology it takes up. The two connect because Descartes' withdrawal from the world is not simply a reflection of the difficulty of doing philosophy when surrounded by others, by the interests of my house, which I must not neglect, the conversations and amusements that I cannot evade, as Elizabeth has it in her letter to Descartes. It also sets the starting point for Descartes' investigations. What is this starting point? Descartes' methodological isolation leaves him with a certain set of capacities as the tools for his investigations. No magnifying glass or telescopes needed here. These are the capacities that can still be exercised in isolation, most prominent among the capacities involving the recognizing his opinions and giving and withholding assent, and in reasoning on the basis of judgments he has made. These capacities are self-conscious capacities, since they involve the mediator's ability to recognize and assess some of the aspects of his perspective. Much of what we know and much of what we do is mediated by the exercise of these capacities. Think of the way we reflected on whether we were right to think that the schools would reopen in May, or whether it is appropriate to worry so much about a loved one's health. Self-conscious capacities play a central role in our intellectual, ethical, and collaborative lives. Yeah, it's got a 5-minute cooldown, Tindarios. Because people started canceling multiple words, and I need to be able to speak. So yeah, I've declared that it's only for 5 minutes, and we're only doing one at a time because yeah. And I also fixed it, yeah. Oh yeah, of course, definitely not you. And I also put a cooldown on drink because I think people were trying to drown me. Self-conscious capacities are the tools of Descartes' investigation, but they also give him the content for his inquiry. For the aim of the meditations is to reflect on the way these capacities enable knowledge and to show how much knowledge of the nature of things can be gained simply by reflecting on the nature of these capacities and their role in inquiry itself. The project of the meditations thus begins not only in the exercise of self-conscious capacities, but also on the exercise of self-conscious capacities. It begins with reflection on reflection. Yeah, so stretch cheese. See, the trick is you push up with your hands and you push down with your torso. So it gives your back like a torsion kind of thing. It's going up and down at the same time. So what you do, then you go up and one down. And then, so that gives a sort of like the twisty sort of thing here. So one pushes up on the sky and one pushes down on the floor. Then that actually gives your back a little bit of a nice, thing. Just humble bragging that I have 39,000 points, so I think I'm like a diamond baron. It's true. There is a stream I've been in. The guy who brought me a Twitch, Mr. Lama SC. So a lot of times you'll see me wave with this wave because I've had this for years. He doesn't have many. He has like almost no channel point things. So I have something like 500,000 channel points there. You can recommend weighted bands. I got one with up to 116 kilograms of resistance. Yeah, I mean I had them many years ago and I thought they were pretty good actually. I need to start working out again. I have not been working out at all. But yeah, I also agree on the weighted bands. One continual source of exasperation with earlier philosophy is its insistence on starting somewhere where we no longer wish to start. This is all the more so when that starting point is motivated by considerations which now seem to us quaint or mistaken. I just flood that shit in one day. Yeah. It is common to present Descartes' motivations in starting with self-consciousness as resting on an illegitimate demand for certainty. This can seem quaint in its requirement that stability be achieved only through building on firm foundations, and mistaken in assuming that the meditator's knowledge of his self-conscious life is somehow more secure than his knowledge of the world. Absent those commitments, why should we follow Descartes in taking self-consciousness to be the starting point for our investigations? Well, philosophy has to start somewhere, and Descartes' isolationist starting point need not be motivated by the thought that our self-conscious capacities are especially secure in delivering knowledge about our own minds. It can start instead from a more flat-footed recognition that these capacities are central to our human lives, both intellectual and practical. Understanding the nature of these capacities is thus a central part of understanding what it is to be human, and so it is natural for a reflective person to alight upon those capacities that make reflection possible. Descartes' isolationist starting point can be seen as a way of making vivid an inquiry which turns self-conscious capacities on themselves as a way to examine how much is built into the fact that we are creatures with such capacities. Why think that our ways of thinking and experiencing the world are any less subject to historical contingencies than our ways of speaking and dressing? Good question. Like, we are always creatures of our time and place. Always. People like to treat philosophy, and a lot of times analytic philosophy especially, as anachronistic, as like, talking about like immortal truths, things that are outside of time. It's not the case. It's not the case at all. You're always a product of like, what you were taught, what's hot that like in your generation, like what are the trends in philosophy. Otherwise you just don't hear about stuff. Like you don't hear about what other cultures and times and places think about because it's just not there. And so you might be thinking about stuff that, may span millennia, but it's still the stuff that like was relevant to you at your time and place. That span that sort of millennia. But like you go to like China, they're going to be talking about different things. And so there may be overlap, but it's not going to be the same. Okay. Kant's critique of pure reason shares this construal of the philosophical project. All of the questions of philosophy, he tells us, can be found in the question, what is the human being? Yeah, so Kant is major, big time guilty of this, thinking, we're talking about the big questions. But again, a lot of these people are just trying to justify their Christian opinions, which of course religious and metaphysical. But yeah. Kant does not think that we need to isolate ourselves in order to answer this question, but nor does he think it an empirical question to be answered solely through anthropology. Instead, he is moved by the recognition that we are self-conscious creatures capable of reflecting on our thoughts and actions. At least part of his interest in the question of how much knowledge of the world is available to someone who has these capacities. On this way of understanding the Meditations and the First Critique, each starts with self-consciousness and aims to see how much knowledge of the world follows in its wake. A lot, according to Descartes. The first edition of the Meditations takes as its subtitle, quote, in which are demonstrated the existence of God and the immortality of the soul, end quote. Keep this in mind. We read a paper about psychology last week. A few days ago, last Philosophy Roulette, claiming to prove the existence of free will based on a little bit of contemporary psychology and experiments. I'm sorry. This is just like, it's laughable to me, given the history of philosophy, where you're talking like Descartes thinks they're proving this, and then last Philosophy Roulette, we're just like, oh yeah, a little bit of psychology proves that like free will exists in like the sort of libertarian, like, oh yeah, the soul whisper, like the consciousness whispers to you and gets you to do stuff differently. It's like laughable. And like sort of this long viewpoint, like looking hundreds of years where people think they've been arguing this stuff. But yeah. So yeah, that was 479 when we were talking about that stuff. But yeah, funny to me. The second edition softens the claim of the more accurate, quote, in which are demonstrated the existence of God and the distinction between the human soul and body, end quote. They make clear that Descartes thinks great mileage can be wrung out of the nature of self-consciousness. Simply by reflecting on the nature of self-conscious capacities, we can come to recognize our own existence, our nature as a thinking thing, the existence of God, and eventually the existence and nature of the material world. Kant is similarly optimistic. It follows from the very fact that we are self-conscious that we are situated in a world of causally interacting substances located in space and time, with properties that can change over time according to general laws. Reflection on self-consciousness can get us knowledge of the world. There can seem something magical about these projects. And this is what I'm laughing about. It's like you can just sort of reflect, and you can, like, with a little bit of like moving the words around, all of a sudden you get these grand powers about understanding these things. It's like, yeah, is that how it works? A little bit of alchemy going on right here. For how could reflection on the capacities involved in self-conscious thought lead us to the distinction between the soul and body, or to the existence of a world of causally interacting substances? In Descartes' case, the magic is underwritten by a proof of God's existence, since God's status precludes our being deceived about the material causes of our beliefs. For Kant, it is underwritten by his claim that the nature of the world depends, in some sense, on our ability to cognize it. It is God's grace and beneficence and Kant's transcendental idealism which allows us to get substantive knowledge of the world from reflections on the nature of self-conscious capacities. You see, this is, magical sort of thinking. It's amazing. Neither of these options seemed tenable to philosophers in the 20th century, and few today are brave or foolhardy enough to have God or idealism play the role they did in Descartes' and Kant's own arguments. One option is to give up the starting points. Another is to keep the starting points but weaken the conclusions. Instead of trying to uncover the nature and existence of the world, we aim only to show how self-conscious subjects must think or experience the world. Perhaps self-conscious subjects must think of or experience themselves as situated in a world of objects. This gives us a link between self-consciousness and objects in some broad sense, but the retreat from worldly conclusions obviates the need for God or idealism. Yeah, so, once you say, this is all we can think of, then you're cutting God and idealism out of it. It just says, this is how we perceive. You're talking about our perception. But really all that actually does is it just pushes the old theories of God and idealism into theories of mind. It doesn't get rid of all the old theories. It just rebrands them as theories of mind. That's what happens. Okay. This option played out in two ways in the 20th century. The first is found throughout the phenomenological tradition. It starts with the self-conscious subjects and aims to show that they must experience themselves as embodied subjects situated in the world of objects. This is an argument from self-consciousness to the world in some sense, but the project is now understood as aiming only to show how we must experience the world. It was a self-conscious reaction to Kant's own arguments and aimed to avoid transcendental idealism by confining itself to conclusions about the way things are presented as being rather than how things actually are. Yeah, so it's just the way the world appears to us, the way it's presented as being. The second route is now most associated with P.F. Strawson, but it threads throughout mid-20th century analytic philosophy. It too starts with self-conscious subjects, but the aim instead is to show that they must think of themselves as embodied subjects, situated in a world of objects. Strawson describes this in the subtitle and introduction to his book Individuals as a project of descriptive metaphysics, that of showing how self-conscious creatures such as ourselves must think about the world. And in his commentary on the Critique of Pure Reason, it is explicitly presented as a version of Kant's project, shorn of its commitment to transcendental idealism. These retreats can feel unsatisfying to those who share the ambitions of the Cartesian and Kantian projects. The worst paper you have ever seen, let's see. Maybe let me do something real fast. I don't want to show this on YouTube. For you can see why. Okay, the Darwin Awards. Very good. We can save that. 1 second. No, that is not what I wanted. Oh, that's why. This is what, yeah. It's so bad, it's funny. The Darwin was sex differences in idiotic behavior. Sex differences in risk-seeking behavior, emergency hospital admissions, and mortality are well documented. In idiotic risk-taking behaviors, paper reviews data on winners of the Darwin Award over 20 years. Brilliant. That's brilliant. Okay. But yeah. This paper reports a marked sex difference in Darwin Award winners. Males are significantly more likely to receive than females. I wonder why. Simple. Oh, I didn't want to do that right there. Sci-Hub. It's not exactly, I can do that one next. It was that I didn't want to show the Sci-Hub link, but it's too late now. Anyway. Whatever's. Too late. Because, in certain jurisdictions, Sci-Hub is not exactly well looked upon. So. No, actually. You will never see Sci-Hub on my, VODs, Tindarius. Or very rarely. Yeah. A little risky keeping the link in chat even. Yeah, well, too late there. I'm not getting rid of it. I mean, I can say never go to Sci-Hub if it's not legal in your jurisdiction. That would be very, very naughty and against your laws. And always obey all the laws of your local jurisdictions. So I was not looking very carefully, and then I realized when I was after I did it. So it's like that's the thing. But yeah, no problems. Because depending on your jurisdiction, it could turn you into problems. I wouldn't want that for you. Anyway, but yeah, we can do that next time. I'm not doing it tonight because I'm already. Let's see, where are we? We're right here. We still got plenty of this to read, so we're not going to get to anything else tonight after this. Okay. These retreats can feel unsatisfying to those who share the ambition of the Cartesian and Kantian projects. When the children ask for bread, Michael Dummett, when asked, will you give them a stone? Yeah, because if you're looking for the way the world is and you say, well, this is how you feel about it, that's not the same answer. But even on their own terms, they betray a striking confidence about the immutability of our perspective on the world, one which contrasts with the way R.G. Collingwood, Stuart Hampshire, or Bernard Williams understood their own work. Our fundamental ways of thinking, Strawson says, are ones which, quote, have no history or none recorded in histories of thought. There are categories and concepts which, in their most fundamental character, change not at all, end quote. But why think that our ways of thinking and experience the world are any less subject to historical contingencies than our ways of speaking and dressing? And why should it be easier to show how self-conscious subjects must think or experience the world than it is to show how the world really must be? Okay, quote, what are the practices that sustain our faith in ourselves as the agents of our thinking? Yeah. The alternative is to reject the Cartesian and Kantian starting points. Why should we hamstring our intellectual activity by abjuring the deliverances of our senses? Descartes' isolation goes too far. At the tail end of the 18th century, the philosopher, physicist, and aphorist George Christoph Lichtenberg makes the opposing complaint. Descartes' starting point is not isolationist enough, for it involves claims to which he is not entitled. Quote, one should say it is thinking just as one says it is lightning. To say cogito is already too much as soon as one translates it as I am thinking. To assume the I, to postulate it, is a practical requirement. End quote. This is a good point. Some people claim that we can only say, when thinking, then something exists. There's something that exists. You can't say, then I exist. But you can say, when I think, then I exist. But you have to already make that claim about I. But again, maybe in the moment you can do that. So that is a performative thing. When you are performing the thinking, then you can say, well, whatever that thing is that I am doing right now. Because you are doing it while you are thinking it. But it is not just it is thinking. It is B, stay away from me. But when you are doing it, because in that moment you can claim the I. Okay, Lichtenberg's remarks were enormously influential on those who read them. Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, the logical positivists all drew inspiration from them, but their point is easily misunderstood. Lichtenberg is not making a claim about the possibility of a subjectless episode of thinking. The idea is not that Descartes needs to rule out the possibility of thoughts without a subject in order to move from self-consciousness to the world. Lichtenberg is rather raising a question about our entitlement to think of ourselves as the agent of our thinking. Sometimes thoughts strike us like lightning. When this happens, we are their patient. It is central to our self-conscious lives that this is the exception. We are first and foremost instigating agents of our thinking. The question raised by Lichtenberg is, with what right do we think of ourselves as such? Frege also made this point. Frege said that the ideas exist in a different realm, the third realm, which of course in German comes out as the Third Reich, which you can't really, it means something else nowadays. So he had the third realm, and the ideas just come to us from the third realm. We are their subjects in some sense. So this really, really influences 20th century analytic philosophy. Lichtenberg's remarks raise a puzzle that has surprising force. The self-conscious thinking undertaken in isolation is an agential activity. Giving and withdrawing assent is something we do. What entitles us to start with this agential activity? Neither experience nor conceptual mastery nor the machinery of transcendental philosophy puts us in a position to know what are the agents of our thinking. Lichtenberg's alternative is that to assume the I, to postulate it, is a practical requirement. Making sense of this suggestion requires us to draw a distinction between two different ways in which we can take a stand on things. One is theoretical, of the sort involved in believing that things are thus and so. The other is a distinctive sort of practical assent, which Kant sometimes calls faith. Kant thought we had to have faith in God's existence. He meant by this that we are required to assent to God's existence as a condition on being subject to the moral law. And since this assent is practically required of us, in virtue of being subject to the moral law no less, it possesses a distinctive sort of practical justification which contrasts with the ordinary theoretical justification conferred by experience or a priori reasoning. Faith thus not to be contrasted with justified assent. It is a form of it. Reflection on Lichtenberg's remarks show that self-conscious subjects do not have theoretical grounds for believing that they are agents of their thinking. Rather, it is a condition on being self-conscious that we practically assent to the claim that we are the agents of our self-conscious thinking. We are required to have faith. Yeah, I guess I can see how this could be attractive. if you are thinking, well, I'm thinking, well, how do you know it's I? Well, you have nowhere else to turn if you are the one that's like, constantly like, well, who's thinking? I am thinking. You have nowhere else to say, well, it's something else. If you keep doing it, then practically you have to kind of assume that it is you that is doing the going over the thought so many times. What relevance does this have for the Cartesian and Kantian projects of moving from self-consciousness to the world? Lichtenberg's remarks show that we must have faith in ourselves as the agents of our thinking, but faith can be undermined and it can be sustained. This is a central theme of the final part of Iris Murdoch's Metaphysics as a Guide to Morals, a work which has no interest in the Cartesian and Kantian projects. Murdoch instead draws attention to the beliefs, experiences, practices, and rituals which religion once provided for us and which she thinks need to be co-opted to support our search for the good. Kant, too, recognizes the way that specific human institutions, such as the historical church, can sustain articles of faith. And this provides us with a connection to the world, since our faith in ourselves as the agents of our thinking can be and is sustained by beliefs, experiences, and practices that relate us to the world. Self-conscious subjects must have faith in themselves as thinking agents, and it is our relation to the world that sustains this faith. What are the practices that sustain our faith in ourselves as the agents of our thinking? Prime among them is the practice of holding and being held accountable for one's judgments. Consider the philosophical discussion. At its best, it involves holding people accountable for their views. When you tell me that there are no such things as chairs, I take you at your word. I may ask for reasons. I will criticize your view. What is this thing that I'm sitting on? What is this? It would not make sense to engage in these practices if you were programmed to hold your views or if your thoughts struck you like Lichtenberg's lightning. The questions and challenges involved in philosophical discussion are part of a practice in which we hold each other accountable for our thinking. I mean, how much do we hold each other accountable for our thinking? Stay away, Buggy. You are responsible for yourself not being an ass. And, Twitch chat below and maybe even the YouTube chat will call me out if I'm being an ass. But, do I have to listen to any of you? I might have to, if I want to have a Twitch channel, I have to listen to chat. But, you can still be kind of solipsistic. I guess the argument here is that the fact that you have to live in a world means you are kind of responsible to that world. You can't deny that you exist in a world, even if you are the only person there. So, you have to kind of have some responsibility to the world. So you are at least a little bit. Of course I'm being an ass. I'm always an ass. But, this is the question, how much responsibility do we actually have to each other? The fact that we do it is fine as a descriptive thing. I agree with this author, but hold each other accountable for our thinking. It's like you call people out, sure. It's like, yeah, this is what we do, but how much do we actually have to listen to that? If you're Donald Trump, you don't listen to it at all. Yeah, that's fair to Darius, but some people are much bigger asses than others. So if you're someone like Donald Trump who just will blah blah blah, I don't care what other people say. What I say is I'm gonna be so delusional that I will delude the world into agreeing with me because money and power, then you can just kind of get that to go. But it's does it actually work? We say that people like this are delusional, that they just sort of tell the world how it is, and no one actually can affect their thinking. But again, seems that people get away with not doing that. Now, we criticize them for it, but still. Okay. Author says, this can sound overly intellectual. That's kind of what I was saying. It's people avoid this. Okay, but it is part of ordinary life. Sitting with a group of friends in a pub in Manchester one Christmas Eve, I confessed my love of the Christmas song playing on the radio. To say that I was held accountable for my thinking would to be put it politely. Yeah, I want to know what song it was that this person likes. To feel the force of this story, you either have to know my friends or have been in the Trevor on Christmas Eve. Ivan says, it's almost as if morality isn't real. Well, it's fair. This person, I was wondering if anyone would bring this up, but basically they're starting with our rituals and morality and then arguing back that this is how our consciousness is. It's as opposed to the other way around, which is saying consciousness then leads to morality. But it's if you then don't need morality and it's not real, then what are you actually claiming here? Hey, Frank. Frank says Trump gets away with it because of the generally prevailing attitude that Trump's money means he can get away with it. So other people are not actually correcting him. Well, I think it's more than that. He gets away with it because he has money, but he's also kind of, damn it, Buggy, don't do that. I don't know if you could see, but it went like right there. I think he's actually deluded, like he deludes himself or is delusional. So he doesn't understand that people are correcting him. Like he doesn't psychologically even take on the criticisms. So it's not that he's getting away with it. It's that he has like a psychological block. He doesn't understand that he's wrong. Like he doesn't know that he's wrong. And even when people tell him he's wrong, he thinks they are somehow attacking him because they don't like him. They're not telling him like he's just got something, he's made a mistake. Like he never makes mistakes. He's, big head, never makes mistakes. And so he doesn't understand that people are correcting him. He thinks people are attacking him, which is not the same thing. He's not getting corrected. He's being, assaulted. Okay. Mockery, ridicule, teasing. These are also ways of being held accountable for one's thinking. But as some people are not holding him accountable, yeah, I mean, that's a fact. I mean, he gets away with it because he has money, power, and lawyers. But he doesn't understand that either. I don't think he understands exactly that people don't like him because of his opinions. They think he thinks they're probably just dumb or, like they've got their own problems. Yeah, so it's like he doesn't he doesn't get like joking. This is the thing, you hear that he makes fun of other people, but like he's doing something else. He doesn't understand joking because he doesn't understand like corrective behaviors. He doesn't get corrected. He just gets attacked. Okay, our sense of ourselves as the agent of our thinking is an article of faith. That faith is sustained by the practice of holding one another accountable for our thinking. All right, see how much farther we got here. Okay, and this is last section, I guess. This practice is central to our interpersonal relations. Exactly, and he has weird interpersonal relations. It is part of what Strawson once characterized as the participatory stance, that view on others that we take up when we see them as accountable for their actions as appropriate targets of attitudes such as gratitude and resentment. To hold someone accountable for their judgment is to take that judgment to be imputable to them. It is to take them as the agent of their thinking. The practice of being held accountable provides us with a framework with which to sustain the idea that we are agents of our thinking. It is not necessary for this faith, but nor is it irrelevant. Like the stories, images, and rituals that make up a religious tradition, it is a way of shoring up that assent we make on practical grounds alone. Yeah, it's like if you want to actually say you are responsible for what you say, like that makes sense though. But I mean, exactly how is that? And we quite often say, well, you're not responsible for what you say. You are the product of some, thing that happened to you. And that's why you did the thing that happened. You are not responsible. But, other times you want to say you are responsible for this. Okay, and so too the world. For the practice of holding and being held accountable necessarily involves someone other than myself, someone to whom I am answerable and whom I am in a position to call to account. This other thing is not the world of bodies that Descartes leads us to in the sixth meditation, nor is it Kant's world of causally interacting substances located in space and time. It is another person distinct from me and my activities, and that allows one kind of resolution of the Cartesian and Kantian projects. For the faith in myself as the agent of my thinking, which is bound up in the exercise of my self-conscious capacities, is itself sustained by a practice centered on thinkers independent of me and my activities. Isolation ends not through God or idealism, but through faith and practice. Self-consciousness is sustained by others in the world. Does this complete the Cartesian and Kantian projects? It falls short of all that Descartes and Kant hoped to achieve, and in two ways. First, in the strength of the connection. Both Descartes and Kant want to show that self-consciousness requires a relation to an objective world. But the practices which sustain our faith, central as they are to creatures such as us, are not strictly necessary for practical assent. Second, in the nature of the objective world to which we relate. Descartes' world is one of material substances. Kant's is one of causally interacting unities, substances which exist in a single public space, persist through time, and continue to exist beyond our perception of them. The world which The world we find in the practice of holding one another accountable is a world of other thinkers, distinct from us and our activities. This is a social, not material world. All right, so here's this person puts it on the table. I like the way they're writing this, at least. They come out and say, this is a theory of social reality. That's what they've done here. That is what they are arguing for, theory of social reality. You might not like their argument, but at least they are clear about what they're saying. It's not a world of objects. It's not a world of causation. It's a world of social reality. That's what they take as fundamental. Okay. Both shortcomings might be a cause for regret. When the children ask for bread, Michael Dummett asks above, will you give them a stone? No doubt not, John McDowell replies, but what are we to do if the children ask for the moon? The failure of Descartes and Kant's arguments, together with the failure of their 20th century cousins, might ground a pessimistic meta-induction about future success. If we can go no further, there is nothing to mourn about falling. If we can go no further, there is nothing to mourn about falling short. It would be like the power of flight, something which would be nice to have, but whose absence should not be a cause for regret. I mean, yeah, if we can't prove the world exists, so be it. Fine. The difference in world remains. Descartes and Kant sought a world of material bodies. We have found only a social world of other thinkers. Is this a shortcoming? Although Descartes' argument ends with the existence of all material things, the text itself ends with the objections and replies. Do not call them solutions, Descartes insists in a letter to Mersenne. It is a good idea to call them first objection, second objections, and so on, and then to put replies to the objections rather than solutions, so as to leave the reader to judge whether my replies contain solutions or not. Descartes' stated aim is the world of material bodies, but it is in disputation with others that he finally rests. Why should this be a less attractive destination than a material world of objects? Mutual attention is at the root of child development, and we care more about recognition from one another than we do for the rigid fidelity of things. We should not confuse the objectivity of the social world with the objectivity of the material world. That much is true. But nor should we take one as its sole exemplar. The world of other people, like the world of material objects, is not of our making. Systemax, solipsism is essentially what occurs in dreaming. Yeah, I mean, there's a point that, like, I'm in somewhat of an agreement with this person, but, like, not really. Kind of, you need to have a world of some sense. You need to still be interacting with things that are outside of yourself. Whether that is the social world, the material world, or even the dream world. Like, you need a world. You can't really do it on your own. Like, there is nothing on your own. So, like, Descartes trying to get rid of everything makes no sense to me. I agree. But you need a world. This is like the social world, and it's not like this author is arguing for social world, and like Kant was arguing for a causally efficacious world. I don't know if that's correct. I'm not a Kant scholar, but that's what the author at least says. But it's like, yeah, I understand, like, I understand, like, sort of the structure of the argument here. And so solipsism, yes, but, like, it's what's occurring in dreaming. But again, I'm not even gonna, like, for myself, putting, like, what I think, like, even then you still have a world. It's a dream world. Even if you're not interacting with things external to you, it still need a world of some sort. Okay, last two paragraphs. One should say it is thinking just as one says it is lightning, Lichtenberg writes. To say that I'm thinking is already too much. Lichtenberg is right that the Cartesian and Kantian projects assume the existence of a subject who recognizes herself as the agent of her thinking, and right, too, that this is unsupported. To assume the I, to postulate it, he tells us, is a practical requirement. I have suggested that our sense of ourselves as the agent of our thinking is an article of faith. That faith is sustained by the practice of holding one another accountable for our thinking. Conversation, argument, gossip, these are the spaces where we say, quote, I think, end quote. They are the spaces that relate us to other thinking beings independent of me and my activities. They are the spaces that relate us to an objective world. Is interesting. They just made this argument here is what is the use of the word when you say I think. If I say I think, I'm talking to someone else. I don't talk to myself and say I think. I just say what do I think? But like when I talk to someone else, if I have to actually use it, it's in a social sense that you are saying I think, and that's where the author's really coming from here, it looks like. So what are their examples? These are the spaces where I say I think. What's up, Liquid Self? Good evening. Me, hey chat. Hope everyone's doing well today. Yeah, doing all right. Welcome in, Liquid Stealth. See, I think I've seen you around somewhere. We were just finishing up this article about maybe the Cartesian and Kantian starting points in their philosophy is wrong. This author is arguing that the social is more fundamental than like sort of the mental. Okay, in the last paragraph. Quote, I shall be glad if people make me as many objections as possible, end quote. Descartes writes to Mersenne, quote, and the strongest ones that they can find, end quote. The objections collected by Mersenne were bound together with the Meditations in a single volume, 2 parts of a continuous project. Descartes' Meditations end in a world of extended substances, but the Meditations itself ends with other thinkers criticizing, cavilling, and holding to account. This is how we end our isolation. In argument, in conversation, in drafty halls filled with laughter and chatter, in philosophy. Okay, so that was interesting. This was very different. And this essay is an edited extract from his book, The Practical Self, forthcoming in 2024 by OUP. And it's from philosopher in Trinity College. So what do we have to say about this? We can give it a little rating here. This was very different. We have not had a literary sort of philosophy in a while. I used to, way back when, go to Literature and Philosophy, which is a journal, like, just publishes papers, but it would be a lot of times on literary subjects, and then the people who were writing in Literature and Philosophy a lot of times were, much more literary. This is much more like that, where they're talking about, life and stuff and things like that. You were rated in a few days ago with Evolve Yourself. Aha, you've been stopping by as often as you can. Yeah. Evolve Yourself. Cool. Agni's good man. Okay, so what do we think about this paper here? Braindance, was this fun? Did you think, trying to argue against Kant and Descartes on, this sort of the wrong position for knowledge? Like, where do you actually start your philosophy from? Is it the social? Is that right? Was that a fun idea? Did they make big claims that shriveled up? Because, they were claiming that, what did they claim? Basically, that the social was more fundamental, that faith was required. So Frank liked it. So Frank said we got some vote yay, fun ideas, and some sort of deep thoughts. That's cool. Was it navel gazing? This is kind of public philosophy. I don't really think this was too navel gazing myself, but if you think so, that's cool too. Was this existential, saying what it means to be human, or artistic drama? I don't know. Was it all style, no substance, the golden turd? And was it analytically slicing and dicing? It did a little bit of analytic stuff, but I wouldn't say that was the main thing here. It basically just pulled the Lichtenberg quote and said, look, that when you say I think therefore I am, what right do you have to say think? Yeah, so Ivan Neo didn't like it. Navel gazing in Golden Turd. I figured that Ivan would go that way on this one, but this is why you're the meanest reviewer. No, Ivan, I don't think you're the meanest. I think you just have a set. Well, there goes the voice. You have a set things of you have what you like in philosophy, and if it's not that, you're gonna not like it. That is okay. You're allowed to have opinions. Yeah. So let me think. What do I think about this? MDD is closer to Frank. They gave it an existential thing too. I guess they feel the social has to do with what it is to be alive, to have faith in the world and social stuff, and not faith in the world, but faith in that what you do. You have to have faith that you are doing something practically. And that was the argument here, is that you have faith, and that is a practical kind of faith, that it is you who are responsible for your thoughts. And so I guess there is some stuff thing. Ivan says, I think doing Descartes or Socrates in philosophy is often like doing Galen in Mexican medicine. Fair, but this person also argued 20th century philosophy about the social. So they quoted Iris Murdoch, who's a 20th century philosopher. And so, yeah. So Tindarius is doubting Ivan Neo's, but in that sense, they have also written vote nay for themselves during this session. So, possible. All right, so what am I thinking? I kind of thought it was fun. It's good to get, I haven't heard a good argument for social reality in a while. Maybe that's just because I haven't looked at this sort of stuff. So I actually appreciate that. So what am I going to give it? So we'll give it a brain dance. This is gonna be like this is the most used emote, of course. I guess I'll give it an Ouroboros because I don't have anything else really to is there Frank says, I think there's a very real sense in which I am the part of my body brain devoted to social interaction. Yeah, I mean it is fair that like the I relation, the first person, that is a social claim. First person ascriptions I, as opposed to second person you, or third person like he, she, they, or whatever. Like that is a social sort of dynamic thing. Tindero says you're just going because it feels like I vote every third paper or the nay in the long run. Aha, I see. Well, whatever. You want me to get rid of it, Tinderios? Because that will get recorded. I can delete it later. Yeah, so Frank says, therefore my words literally is just the social world, not the material. And the rest of my body deals with the material. Yeah, but I mean, that is kind of what the author's point was. And that's what I highlighted right at the end. When do you actually say, I think? It's when you are talking with other people. So they're saying the I, the first person perspective, that is a social reality. Now, you were serious? Well, there you go. I'll leave it. Cool. So what am I going to give it? I'll give it a vote yay, because I think this was worth reading. You may not agree with it, but I thought it was well written and it made a decent point. Now, is this a knockdown argument for social reality? No, but I don't think that's what they were going for either. This is, a popular magazine on the internet, meant to be a little bit more accessible and therefore not like 100% like philosophically watertight. So I think this was okay. I'm agreeing with Frank and MDD on this one. But that's cool. We've got some differences of opinion, but that's fine. Okay, so that's about